We're reading Ed Young's The 10 Commandments of Marriage, and there's a lot of prophetic love stories that are about to come into fruition of marriage, and this is kind of like our marriage counseling. So we're going to read chapter 3 tonight. Before we get started, I want to pray. Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for this time before you. We thank you. We thank you for your love, your mercy, your grace, and for always being with us, for never forsaking us. You're so amazingly good to us. So good to us. I can't even with you. We just thank you. And we ask that you prepare our hearts for everything that you have for us tonight in this reading, and that you want to add to it. We welcome you, Holy Spirit, and we just ask that you invade this and have your way and your will, and be it unto us as you've spoken. We thank you and praise you, Lord, and I thank you that our angels are here and that the creative angels are doing their thing all across the world. We love you and we praise you. In the name of Yeshua, amen. A personal word. Thou shalt continually communicate. Me and I wrote this chapter for you, especially in mind. Females are Phi Beta Kappa at communication, usually, while we males tend to be the strong, silent type, or at least pretend to be. Let your wife know what's going on in your life. This commandment plays a big part in making your partner your closest friend. The bottom line is learn to communicate. Thou shalt continually communicate. Just a few days after beginning their honeymoon, Rob and Ann had a sharp disagreement. Ann shut down all of Rob's attempts to discuss the problem. Every time he tried to get her to open up, she would reply, "Everything is fine." Finally, in a calm manner, Rob told his new bride their marriage simply could not function like this. After some discussion, Rob and Ann agreed to a hard and fast rule. They would never use the silent treatment on each other. They agreed that while times would come when they would have to postpone debate in order to cool down, under no circumstances would they ever use silence as a weapon. Then and there, they made an open communication a priority. Rob and Ann remained faithful to that commitment, and as a result have enjoyed more than 3 decades of happy marriage. Over the years, Ann has told many friends how much she appreciated Rob taking the initiative at the very beginning of their married life to insist on open and honest communication. People give all kinds of reasons why they believe a certain marriage will work out. They have so much in common. They are both from such good families. They are both such solid Christian people. Now, all of these things are great reasons and certainly can contribute to a couple's... Ooh, hang on. My babies and I were playing today and had that speaker outside, and I forgot to plug it back in, and it was the battery was losing its charge. So I needed to plug that up, or it would beep it through this continually and drive me crazy. Where were we? We'll just start that part right over. The critical factor. People give all kinds of reasons why they believe a certain marriage will work out. They have so much in common. They are both from such good families. They are both such solid Christian people. Now, all of these things are great reasons and certainly can contribute to a couple's success, but I strongly believe that one factor above all others can make or break a marriage. If a couple makes this area a priority, they likely will enjoy an intimate and meaningful relationship for life. If they neglect it, chances are they'll wind up in a miserable union, if the marriage lasts at all. What's the single factor? Communication. Talk to any number of happily married couples and you'll find one common thread: good communication. On the other hand, if you were to survey an average group of divorced men and women, more than likely you'd discover that a breakdown in communication lies at the heart of most marital split-ups. Certainly you'd hear of infidelity and irreconcilable differences and an assortment of other reasons, but in most cases, with a little probing, you would discover these reasons all stem from the core problem: poor communication. If you could sit with me as I listen to couples who have suffered through prolonged marital unhappiness or divorce, you would hear these are similar questions. When did we stop communicating? Why don't we talk anymore the way we used to? Where did we go wrong? Too many couples unconsciously buy into the idea that when they say I do, live under the same roof, eat from the same table, and sleep in the same bed, they automatically grow in intimacy. Yet the simple fact is that these two people are not communicating. If they are merely occupying an adjoining space, they are not growing together but growing apart. Good communication between a husband and a wife takes time and effort, and it's so critically important that I've made it the third commandment of marriage. Thou shalt continually communicate. we all pretty much know that if there's no communication, there's nothing. You got to talk. I agree with that. And be honest. I agree with that too. Understanding marital communication. We ask that you help us to communicate like Esther, that we can get it out exactly the way that it needs to come out, that wisdom guides us and helps us like she did with Solomon. Thank you. Understanding marital communication. Because many of us don't understand the fundamentals of good communication, it's no wonder we feel hamstrung in establishing and maintaining it in our homes. Most of us would probably define communication as a conveying of information through the use of words. In other words, if two people are talking, they are communicating. Good communication, of course, does require the use of words, but there is so much more to it than that. Nonverbal factors such as tone of voice, facial expressions, and body language can affect communication far more than one's choice of words. I can scientifically give a test to that. That's fact. I went to school before God called me to do this, to be a criminologist, and learned body language and how to profile, forensic profiling. And your body language will tell everything there is to tell. I mean, you never even have to open your mouth to somebody that reads body language. And there's a whole lot of people that do that now. But that's true. So get your heart right. Suppose I were to say in a sincere tone of voice delivered from a friendly posture, you're the nicest person I've met in a long time. You rightly would interpret my words as my honest opinion, but what if I were to deliver that same statement while changing my tone of voice and posture and injecting a little sarcasm? In that case, I would convey a completely different message. I'd be saying, in effect, I haven't met any nice people for a long time, and you're the least nice of all the people I've met. Since communication is far more than the verbal delivery of information, establishing effective dialogue can be a complex and challenging task. So let's first look at what hinders good communication. Then we'll consider some principles for effective, meaningful communication. Hindrances to good communication. Let's begin at the beginning. Back in the Garden of Eden, things have never been the same since Adam and Eve plunged headlong into sin. To prompt the fall, the serpent used negative communication. I cancel that spirit of fear right now. In the name of Yeshua, I command that you bow and go. I uproot all seeds, all of them, every last one, and command that they shrivel up and die, never to rise again in thought, will, deed, or emotion. All of them. Holy Spirit, I ask that you hit us with your fire, burn all of it out, all of it, every single last residue, footstep, to where there's no fear left. In the name of Yeshua, thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you, Father. I thank you so much. To prompt the fall, the serpent used negative communication, namely deception, Genesis 3, 1, 4, and 5. He used a rhetorical question, indeed, has God said you shall not eat? To try to deceive Eve, he twisted God's words to imply God was depriving her of all fruit, and he plain lied about the outcome and God's motives. After Eve had been duped into eating the forbidden fruit, she encouraged Adam to try it. Half-truths, manipulation, and downright dishonesty have become tools of communication between men and women ever since. To improve communication, a couple needs to consider the obstacle blocking it. Any number of activities or commitments can consume a couple's time and energy and keep them from communicating fully and deeply. Even the most positive and worthwhile things can drain away precious time and energy. Schedules. Our recent poll indicated that 61% of Americans would trade money for more time. Tragically, many husbands and wives have traded their marriages for their schedules. Certainly, we live in a busy world that never seems to slow down. If anything, it gets busier. Work, appointments, errands, recreation, children, extended families, all these and more contribute to the communication vacuum between husbands and wives. Many marriages appear happy and healthy simply because the husband and wife have so much going on. But a couple can quickly find themselves out of time, out of energy, and drained of emotion, and anything more than these basic communication can seem all but impossible. Healthy communication cannot occur and flourish in a marriage in which the partners fail to take time away from all the busyness to be with each other. And if they can't build communication, they can't build their marriage. Children. While children certainly are the most important result of intimacy in marriage, they can also be the biggest hindrance to it. Children bring great blessings to a marriage, yet they also bring huge responsibility, perhaps the biggest responsibility, granting trust to couples. Parents provide the primary source of support for these little human beings for the better part of 2 decades and possibly longer. Beyond all doubt, children make it more difficult for husband and wives to make time for intimacy and communication. There is no more demanding creature on earth than a baby. Just ask any new parent. My son Cliff and his wife Danielle just had their second little girl. Let me tell you, taking care of Susanna is a full-time job. They have to feed her, change her, clothe her, diaper her, bathe her, give her affection, often in the middle of the night. And in between, they're caring for their 2-year-old Rachel. Even as Susanna grows and matures, she will require an extraordinary amount of attention. Only the kind of attention will change, not the amount. As babies, children need constant care. As toddlers and preschoolers, they need help to develop the ability to talk and read and interact socially. During the elementary school years, children need emotional and educational support. Back up. You're not allowed in this territory. I mean it. Bow and go. And when the adolescent years rolled around, parents must provide untold hours and endless varieties of support and advice. Good parents know that when a hungry baby cries, they can't say, "Not now, I'm sleeping." When their 4th grader asks for help with a math problem, good parents would never shove them aside and say, "Figure it out yourself." And parents should never miss the opportunity to communicate with their teenagers when they want to talk about personal conflicts at school or dating relationships. When a child genuinely needs attention, and they very frequently do, a good parent will always choose to give that attention in every way necessary. All this takes time away from your spouse. Indeed, the attention your children require can lead to their becoming the center of your life, to the exclusion of marital communication and intimacy. Finally, when the last child leaves home, and eventually they do, the empty nest syndrome sets in. A husband and wife are left with whatever relationship they built between one another while the children lived at home. I've seen it time and time again. Couples with nothing to talk about, nothing to share, without major work, such marriage can land in serious trouble. They probably both forgot who they were while they were parenting too, because we lose ourselves in lots of things. Parenting's one of them. So you're more than that. Don't just wear that label as mom or dad. You're way more than that. Television. I hit a nerve every time I describe this third obstacle to communication. It's amazing, even alarming, how many people cannot seem to function without television. Stephen Cefalo and Jonathan Storm, writing in the Philadelphia Inquirer, reported that about 40% of all hours not committed to working, eating, sleeping, or doing chores is consumed by TV viewing for many Americans. They noted that by the time the average American dies, he or she will have spent a decade in front of the television set. Like it or not, since its arrival on the scene some 50 years ago, television has taken a central place in our culture. Now, don't jump to conclusions. I, too, watch television. I can think of many positives about TV. It provides a window to the world and series as an educational tool, and there's nothing wrong with a little entertainment from time to time. But when TV becomes a mind-numbing escape or interferes with our relationship, it crosses the line into a destructive addiction. Who knows how many Americans have become addicted to television? Hundreds of thousands, millions. Could you be one of them? To find out, try and experiment. Turn off your set for a week. If you're used to coming home, plopping into a recliner with a dinner tray on your lap and grabbing the remote for some quiet getaway time of channel surfing, then I predict you will have a tough time turning off the TV. But do it anyway, and then take a walk with your husband or wife and talk about anything and everything. I agree with that, and I don't agree with television being in the bedroom, because they're portals, and they're portals. They're portals. If you have a TV in your bedroom and there's children having bad dreams or nightmares, remove the TV. That's first step. Because I can remember when I first moved here 3 years ago, I had a TV. I don't have cable, but my internet is back there, and the TV works better back there. So I had the TV in the bedroom, and then for some reason I couldn't sleep. I would be up all night in there, and so I even moved, because I slept on an air mattress here for like the first 8 months I was here. I moved my bed into another bedroom, thinking maybe there's something about that room that I don't need to be in that room. No, I didn't sleep in. I slept in that one, but then I really liked that bedroom better, and I was like, "What's up, Holy Spirit?" Because it was kind of like I was trying out all of them, and He's like, "Get the TV out of there," and I was like, "Wow, seriously?" So I got the TV out of there, and I could sleep so much better. So if you have a TV in your room, get it out. It's an open portal for demons, and there's really not anything that is needed from there. It is just maybe football on Saturdays. We'll go on. Fear of conflict. If a husband and wife never have any conflicts, they probably aren't communicating. Conflict is part of any normal marriage. As long as both partners remain willing and able to communicate, they can overcome conflict and even grow and learn from it. But some people allow their fear of conflict to keep them from effectively communicating with anyone, including their spouse. Suppose a man grew up in a home where his parents settled conflicts or disagreements according to volume. Whoever yelled the loudest or broke the most dishes won. Such a man might feel afraid to truly communicate, since he associates disagreements with loud or violent outbursts. That's trauma response. Healing trauma will cure that. Or perhaps a woman grew up in a home in which her mother was constantly belittled by verbal put-downs or sarcasm. In her own marriage, such a woman might hesitate to express her thoughts or feelings for fear of being hurt or humiliated. That's trauma too. Schedules, children, television, and fear of conflict are merely four of the most common obstacles facing couples who want effective communication in their marriages. If they are to create solid and happy homes, however, husbands and wives must find ways to overcome these hindrances. Successful marriages clear away the obstacles and labor to build layer upon layer of effective communication. Levels of communication. Dr. David Mace, a pioneer of the field of marriage enrichment, wrote several books on improving marriages and marriage communication. In 1973, he and his wife Vera founded the Association for Couples in Marriage Enrichment, AMCE, ACME, with the slogan, "To work for better marriages, beginning with our own." The Maces stressed a commitment for growth, the ability to make creative use of conflict, and an effective functioning communication system as the keys of a happy union. ACME insists that couples must have a mutually agreed upon system of talking with and listening to each other. Since all communication is learned, what is not helpful can be unlearned and new skills substantiated for those that hinder the relationship. Throughout this work, Mace emphasizes deep communication between the husband and wife. He and other marriage counselors have noted there are various levels at which spouses try to talk to one another. Sadly, most communicate on level 1, the shallowest level of all, that of simply exchanging cliches. Let's examine each level of communication. Cliches. How's it going? How are you today? I've discovered that when somebody greets me with one of these little cliches, he really isn't asking for a report on how things are going. One time I actually stopped the person and began answering the question in detail. You should have seen the shock on his face as he began backing away, making excuses that he was late for a meeting. Now, I don't recommend you doing this. It could lead to an embarrassing situation, but for sake of illustration, I just had to see that if what I thought would happen really would, and it did. When someone asks, "How are you?" He doesn't especially want to know your physical, emotional, or spiritual condition. He is simply trying to be polite by greeting you in a socially acceptable way. Cliches and casual conversations serve to acknowledge someone's presence. They have little to do. They have little to essentially. They have little to no essential meaning. We use them in casual contact with business associates and with new acquaintances. They mean little more than does a simple handshake. Even the most damaged marriages must move beyond this most elemental level of communication, as do our most casual friendships. I call that small talk. I'm not a small talker. Um, not one. Just the facts. One level up from clicks becomes a delivery of factual information. At this level, we communicate. This sounds like communicate with somebody you tolerate. One level up from clicks comes from the delivery of factual information. At this level, we communicate facts apart from any kind of interpretation or opinion or emotional response. It's raining today. The meeting is scheduled for 1 p.m. It's time to change the oil in the car. Every healthy relationship requires the exchange of facts. The communication of facts helps a married couple to plan everything from what they will wear or do on a particular day to how they will care for one another and their children. While husband and wife certainly need to learn how to accurately communicate facts, they can hardly sustain and grow a healthy marriage on this alone. A healthy personal relationship of any kind requires both parties to communicate on a still deeper level. Opinions and convictions. When we communicate an opinion, we begin to give the hearer a glimpse of what makes us tick. In other words, a person discovers not just what we think, but why. Our statements of opinion or conviction reflect our beliefs, loyalties, and personal commitments. By communicating an opinion or conviction, we state a fact and what we believe about that fact. Most often, we communicate opinions or convictions by beginning with statements such as, I believe that, I think that, it appears to me that. If you are talking with your spouse about a shakeup at the office, the facts might sound like this. They moved Bill over to accounting and then promoted Francis to take his old position. But you might also communicate your opinion by saying, I think this change is going to make for a smoother running office once we get used to working with Francis, or they still have treated Bill, they shouldn't have treated Bill that way. It's at this level of communication that conflicts often arise. When married couples begin to share opinions and convictions, disagreements can develop, which can escalate into arguments. Yet this is not necessarily a bad or unhealthy thing, so long as both sides respect one another and remain willing to work out their disagreements in love. Love them where they are. Love them where they are. Love them where they are. That's what I was taught on that one. Love them where they are. You don't have to argue. Take it to the Lord. Feelings. What are you feeling? This question causes most men to break out into a sweat. It seems that we men often struggle at this level. We're great at communicating facts. We're not too bad at voicing our opinions, but most of us labor at sharing our feelings. I think that's with everybody, depending on who they're talking to, not just men. We know facts, we believe our opinions, but we experience our feelings, and some of us have lost touch with the experience. Imagine if you were telling your spouse about that office shakeup. Your feelings towards Bill's replacement could be relief, joy, anger, or disappointment. You might even feel betrayed. It all depends on your opinions and personal feelings towards Bill or toward the pre-shakeup work situation. Would you be able to describe your feelings to your spouse? At the feelings level, we enter something of a danger zone in our relationship. Here's why. Communicating feelings requires making ourselves vulnerable. We let our spouses know that we feel happy, anxious, upset, or angry, and sometimes at them. Discovering what's really going on in the heart of a husband or wife frightens many married people. Yet to grow in our marriages, we have to grow in our communication. And to grow in our communication, we must learn to communicate our feelings freely but with wisdom. I agree with that. Communication is so needed. But the ones that the Lord has been training can feel what other people are feeling. You can just be in the room with them and you know what they're feeling. And whether you call it out or not is depending upon you and what the Lord tells you. Because there's a lot of things that I feel that I don't ever call out. And I just pray about it when it's over. Communicating needs. We reach the deepest level of communication when we communicate our needs. Any marriage counselor, Christian or secular, will insist on the crucial place in a human psyche of communicating needs. Married couples especially have to learn how to communicate on this level. Fortunately, we communicate our needs almost instinctively beginning as infants. Babies cry when they feel hunger, needing change, or just want to be picked up. As we mature, we learn to verbalize our needs more articulately. Mom, I'm hungry. As we grow into adulthood, our needs become more complex, as do our ways of communicating those needs. In marriage, both husband and wife must learn to tactfully but directly communicate their needs. This is where the all-important give and take must occur. Both the husband and wife must learn to communicate their need for affection, for quiet time, for solitary time, for conversation, for encouragement, and for all other needs God intends to provide through marriage. It is within the framework of this level of communication that a couple bonds and blends and becomes one. Marriage means communicating with a foreigner. John Gray's best-selling Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus shocked the world with the not especially keen observation that men and women think and react differently to the same situations. Imagine that men think differently than women in both. It bothers some segments of our population that God wired men and women differently. But you don't have to be married long to realize that huge differences exist in the way men and women think and communicate. While I wouldn't say that men and women are from different planets, I will acknowledge that the sexes seem at least to hail from foreign nations. Just as problems can arise when people from different countries try to communicate, so can problems arise when men and women try to communicate, if they don't put in the effort necessary to truly understand one another. The word foreigner suggests someone who talks differently, perhaps thinks differently, and has a different cultural background from my own. A man from Malaysia is different from me, yet that doesn't make him all wrong, any more than it makes me all right. We're simply different. That's how it is with me and my wife. If I look at JoBeth from a completely Edwin perspective, excuse me, I'd conclude that she is wired all wrong. Not only does she look completely different from me, she thinks, reasons, and communicates in a completely foreign way. Yet after more than 4 decades of marriage, I can now celebrate my differences with JoBeth. I thank God that we balance one another out. She's strong where I'm weak, and I'm strong where she's weak. It hasn't always been easy for us to learn to communicate effectively with the foreigner we each married, but it has been well worth the effort. So how do you communicate with a foreigner? Here are 2 simple steps to help you better communicate with the foreigner to whom you're married. Talking and listening straight. The first step may seem obvious, but many married couples struggle with it. Say what you mean. Only one person can control how you communicate, and that person is you. Many couples struggle to communicate effectively because they avoid straight talk. They don't say what they mean, what they need, and what they want. Many people find such straight talk uncomfortable, even frightening. That's fear of rejection and fear of losing somebody. They fear to communicate exactly what they need and want, so they drop hints that often go unrecognized. Others go too far with straight talk, issuing their demands with little tact or sensitivity. Still others try the most dysfunctional forms of communication, such as outbursts or anger or the dreaded silent treatment. But nothing beats good, honest, open communication. Years ago, JoBeth and I were on a road trip. We spotted an exit and said, "Would you like to stop and get something to drink?" I completely missed what she intended to communicate and so replied, "No, I'm okay. Let's just press on." A half hour later, as we approached another exit, JoBeth said explicitly what she had hinted at earlier. "I sure would like to stop and get something to drink," she announced. "Why didn't you tell me earlier?" I asked. I asked you if you wanted something to drink, so I thought you would ask me. I've learned that through surviving traumatic brain injury and being healed from that, I am such a literal person. So I can totally see what he's saying. If you want it, say it. I mean, they don't know. People can't read your thoughts. They might be able to read not everything. If they don't know, everyone is you pushed out. You have to tell them. You have to talk to them. In Jobeth's mind, why would you like to stop and get something? Would you like to stop and get something to drink? Meant I would like to stop and get something to drink. But that's not how I heard it. In my mind, my wife asked a straightforward question, and I replied with a straightforward answer. No, I'm fine. In one way, my wife's question reflected an unselfish approach. She had no intention of manipulating my response. She wanted something to drink, so she threw out her question, hoping I'd respond, why, yes, honey, I'm thirsty. I think I would like to stop for a Coke. Since those days, however, JoBeth has learned that she'll get much further with me by being direct and to the point. While I've learned to listen more intently when she throws out other suggestions. Do you want or need something from your mate? Then it's up to you to tell him or her what you want. Dropping hints might be fine for Christmas shopping, but regular day-to-day communication demands a more direct approach. Say what you mean and mean what you say, but do so with tact and sensitivity. I prayed for that. I prayed, teach me what to say, when to say it, and how to say it, because I know there is a way to tell everyone or tell anyone anything. Help me. So we pray that over us now, Father, that you help us with that, to where we say everything openly, honestly, with tact and kindness, and backed with a heart full of compassion. I always feel a little leery of those who say, I always say what I mean. You never have to guess with me. People like that often move beyond directness and head towards cruelty or even abuse. I've known married couples who overly direct communication has devastated their marriages. And tone has a lot to do with it when it comes to communicating effectively what you need from someone else. Because your tone can be mistaken. Speaking forthrightly, however, makes up only one half of straight talk. Listening actively makes up the other half. The only way we'll ever get the whole picture is by concentrating on the words, as well as searching for other clues, such as verbal nuances, facial expressions, and body language. Listening is hard work. It means listening with the ears, watching with the eyes, and understanding how your spouse acts and reacts. And you cannot achieve straightforward communication without it. I've seen him do that to me, teaching me how to live in the now and how to effectively communicate with others around me and totally listen to them. Totally listen to them. Which, I mean, we should be attentive and listen when we're in the middle of a conversation. But I would space out and go somewhere else, and I'd have to, snatch my mind back into the now, into that conversation. And I've done it. I've done it. I don't drift until I don't drift, which is a huge accomplishment for me. Learning how your spouse is wired. The second step is to understand how your spouse is wired. How does your spouse best give and receive messages? This means deciphering if he or she is an auditory person, a visual person, or a feeling person. Auditory people like to communicate verbally. They use words carefully and take great pains to analyze how others use them. The auditory person wants and needs to hear how much he or she is loved. If your husband or wife falls into this category, then you need to frequently speak the words, I love you. Nothing else can replace the sound of those precious words. Have you read The 5 Love Languages by Gary Chapman? There's, and usually that person's love language is how they speak until they know someone else. I didn't know that about the auditory. I'm an auditory learner. And I tell people I love you all the time, every day, all the time. A stranger on the road, I love you. I want everybody to know that how loved they are. I didn't know that. Because words of affirmation is not my love language, but I could see how, that cycle spins right there. The visual person paints a mental picture of an idea and communicates most effectively on a visual level. This individual may love to hear the words, I love you, but he or she wants to see those words demonstrated in loving actions. By and large, we men are visual creations. The feelings person accurately perceives messages even when little or no visual or verbal communication seems to be occurring. The feelings individual picks up moods, demeanor, and posture. This person senses what others communicate non-verbally and likely communicates in the same way. A good car salesman can demonstrate the benefits of knowing and responding to a person's communication wiring. A successful car salesman almost instinctively picks up on what potential car buyers want when they walk through the showroom door. Such a salesman may not consciously think of it this way, but in order to effectively sell his cars, he needs to know how his customer is wired, visual, auditory, or feelings. The salesman might steer the visual customer towards a sleek, flashy vehicle. He'll be quick to point out how sharp the car looks and how great the customer looks behind the wheel. You can be sure he'll point out the aesthetic of the car's interior, the colors, the appearance of the dashboard, the rich leather upholstery. The visual person might be tempted to purchase such a car simply because of the way it looks. The auditory car buyer, on the other hand, listens to the car, how the engine runs, how the transmission shifts, what the doors sound like when they slam shut, how well the interior muffles noises when the car is moving, how well the entertainment system plays a favorite CD. This individual will not buy the car if it doesn't sound right. The feelings person pays most attention to the image of an automobile. Car makers aim most of their advertisement at these individuals. The majority of television ads these days appeal to emotion. They try to elicit feelings within the potential car buyer, and many of them enjoy great successes. Feelings are fickle. Not on your feelings. The successful car salesman, because that song a while ago that was playing, Holy Spirit, lead me. I don't trust my feelings, lead me. The successful car salesman has learned to identify the various kinds of communicators who walk into the showroom. Have you taken the time to identify what kind of communicator your spouse is, how he or she is wired? When you do so, you are well on your way to establishing more meaningful, deeper, and healthier marital communication. Jump-starting communication in your marriage. Another way to deepen marital communication is to be sure your spouse knows how deeply you love and appreciate him or her. God created all of us to respond to words and actions of love and adoration. Just think of how many times in the Bible God speaks of his love for you and me. We are valuable to him and he delights in us. God showers us with affection and repeatedly proclaims his personal devotion to us, his children. Therefore, thoughts of God drive me toward him and make me want to communicate with him as my Father in heaven. In a similar way, husbands and wives must make it priority to speak words of affirmation and love to one another. Such heartfelt words can provide the basis for a whole new level of communication. A man the Bible identifies as King Lemuel once wrote of a faithful wife, her children rise up and bless her, her husband also. And he praises her, saying, many daughters have done nobly, but you excel them all. Proverbs 31:28. He wanted his wife to know that although he could have chosen his mate from a large pool of fine, noble women, he chose her, and he got the cream of the crop. How would you respond if your spouse spoke such affirming words to you? If you knew your spouse loved you enough to brag on you to others, wouldn't you feel more than willing to communicate openly and honestly in your marriage? Nothing creates more fertile ground for great communication in marriage than lavishing your mate with praise and affirmation. But how do we do this? How do we affirm and build up our mates and give them the kind of approval each one of us so desperately desires? To me, that's safety, but let's see what he says. Praise is a many-splendored thing. Most of us know how to give verbal praises, even if we don't give it as often as we should. But don't forget the countless nonverbal ways to affirm your spouse. I've noticed that people these days need it verbally, that they don't really understand the nonverbal cues or they take them wrong. So it's best just to vocalize everything. So I've been praying to be able to communicate like Esther for several years. So pray that over yourself. Nonverbal praise might include your body language. The way you look at your mate, your gestures, a smile or a loving look can do wonders in reassuring your spouse of your genuine love. And imagine what further lines of communication might be opened. Get creative in your praise. It's really not so difficult. Leave love notes around the house for your husband or your wife to find. Joe Beth is Phi Beta Kappa at this. I'm forever finding notes on the bathroom mirror, in a sock drawer, in my golf bag. Nothing elaborate, just a few words expressing her love and appreciation for me, and I love finding them. They tend to crop up when I most need encouragement. It's her way of praising me and communicating her love for me. I like that. I do that with just about everybody I know. Various days of the month, I will send out random text messages. So I get that. That's a good practice and a habit to get into. I also recommend strategically spreading good reports about your husband or wife. When you say good things about him or her to a friend or relative, your words of affirmation will more than likely make it back to their ears. And we learned why about that today in John 6:63 on that video that went up. Words are spirit and life and walking, and you can hear them repeated like on repeat. And when that happens, your mate will know what an important place he or she has in your heart. One important note on communicating praise: always make sure it's genuine. Be certain that you're acting to build up your spouse or to open fresh lines of communication. Don't let selfish motives find their way into your praise. And avoid flattery. Don't speak insincere words of praise in order to gain some personal benefit. What can happen when we begin to pour our praises into the life of our marriage partner? Years ago, I read of praise power in a newspaper column written by a marriage counselor who I'll call Dr. Crane. Dr. Crane reported that an angry woman came in to see him one day. "My husband has hurt me," she fumed. "I want not only to divorce him, I want revenge. I want to hurt him. I want to destroy him." Dr. Crane's advice probably surprised the woman. Go home and act as if you really love him. Praise him, honor him, build him up. Cook his favorite meals. Employ all the creative chemistry that you can find in your lovemaking arsenal. Tell him that you just can't resist him, that everything about him is super colossal and fabulous. Play it as if you're madly, helplessly in love with him. Tell him that he is your hero and your champion, and he's everything to you. He told this wife to give herself unreservedly to her husband. Once she did that, had truly captivated him with her attention and convinced him that she was just crazy about him. Then hit him with both barrels. Tell him, "I hate you. I have the meanest lawyer in town, and we're going to skin you alive. You won't have a penny to your name when I'm through with you." Do that, Dr. Crane finished, and you'll spend the rest of his life in absolute misery because he'll never find anybody to match up with you. "That's it," the woman cried. "That's what I'm going to do." So she went home and acted as if she really loved her husband. Dr. Crane didn't hear from the woman for about 3 months. Finally, he called her and said, "Are you ready for the divorce?" "Divorce?" she replied. "I'm married to the most wonderful man on the face of the earth. Why would I want a divorce?" That is what can happen when we begin praising our mates in both words and actions. Severed lines of communication can be repaired and function once more. And even the most difficult marriage can become the loving, supportive institution God meant it to be. Oh, that's great. I like that. An 8-cow wife. Years ago, I read an article about an American who visited a group of South Pacific islands. Everywhere the man went, he would hear the islanders talk about a fellow named Johnny Lingo. Whatever he wanted to do, from going fishing to buying pearls, the people who would tell him that Johnny Lingo was the man to see. It seemed that whatever his question, Johnny Lingo was the answer. He did notice one odd thing, though. While the islanders would brag on Johnny Lingo and describe his talents, they'd also chuckle among themselves and give each other a wink. After a while, the visitor began to wonder, if he's such a wonderful person, then what's the joke? Yet no one would divulge the secret. Finally, a local man decided to give the writer the inside scoop on the island favorite son, Johnny Lingo. The custom among Johnny's people was for the suitor to buy a wife by offering the father's cows in payment. 1 or 2 cows might buy a plain wife, but 5 but a 5-cow wife was a real beauty. Johnny was rich, a man said, but he had paid 8 cows for his wife, much too much. Sarita the bride was plain, the man explained. She was skinny and walked with hunched shoulders and bowed head, and she was scared of her own shadow. He grinned, then told the American, "We've never been able to figure out how Johnny Lingo, the sharpest trader on the island, somehow was tricked into paying her father, old Sam Carew, 8 cows for 1 or 2 cow bride." The story so intrigued the visitor that he had an appointment to visit Johnny Lingo in person. When they met, Johnny showed his guest great hospitality. They talked a while before the guest asked about the unusual high payment for Johnny's wife. "Always and forever," Johnny replied. "When they speak of marriage settlements, it will be remembered that Johnny Lingo paid 8 cows for Sarita." Just then, a stunningly beautiful woman walked into the little hut, the most gorgeous woman the writer had ever seen. Every inch of her striking frame exuded loveliness, the tilt of her head, the confident way she walked, her smile and her radiance. Johnny looked at this puzzled visitor, then he said, "Many things can change a woman, things that happen inside, things that happen outside, but the thing that matters most is what she thinks about herself." In Kittiwata, Sarita believed she was worth nothing. Now she knows she is worth more than any other woman in the islands. Johnny communicated to everyone in the islands loud and clear that he loved Sarita and felt proud to make her his bride. He proves that sparkling communication through loving words and action can achieve what nothing else can. It works in the islands and it can work in your home too. Reflecting on your relationship. On a scale of 1 to 10, 1 can be non-existent and 10 being so good no improvement is possible. Rate the communication in your marriage. How are you and your spouse at communicating your feelings and needs to one another? Describe some hindrances to communication in your marriage. How is your spouse wired? Auditory, visual feelings. In light of your spouse's wiring, how can you best communicate your love to him or her? So those are things that we need to work on. And Father, we thank you for that chapter. And we thank you and praise you for changing us to suit how you need us to be and for making your will our own. We thank you and praise you and love you. In Yeshua's name, amen. Okay, it says that I have one viewer. Who are you? There's no comments, and I don't hardly ever have anybody on YouTube. So let me know who you are. Okay. I love you. Have a good night. And I will see you at 7 tomorrow night for chapter 4. Good night.